Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I've been this excited for an unboxing in a very long time, because inside this box we have the brand stinking new ROG Ally. This of course is a portable games console that is gonna, I guess, go toe-to-toe with the Steam Deck. It's a little bit more expensive, but comes with extra features like a 120Hz display, the brand new Ryzen Z1 processor, and it actually rocks Windows 11 as well, so you can literally play, I guess, any PC game on this. Let's open her up and take a look. Here it is, our ROG Ally. Let's get this thing unboxed on top of the PC-Centric mouse mat, available at pccentric.store. And let's have a look. Well, it's very white. I really like this, but I do immediately worry that it will get a little bit grimy, because obviously you're gonna be touching this pretty much 24/7. But it does actually feel very similar to the Steam Deck. It does have to be said. I mean, immediately putting them side by side, they're pretty much the same sort of size actually. In fact, it looks to me as if the screen size is identical, but the bezel is slightly smaller, and then the body is just a little bit less wide, I suppose. You got your left and right bumpers and triggers on the top, headphone microphone combo jack, micro SD card, and this is actually rated all the way up for UHS 2, and ROG actually say that there's not really going to be that much of a drastic delay, maybe a second or two, versus the Gen 4 SSD that's actually in the ROG Ally. And then everything from here is pretty much as you'd expect. You've got a volume rocker, power switch, more ventilation. So let's get this thing powered on, see if it's actually any good, and let you know whether you should be interested in buying one, right after a short word from this video's sponsor. ASRock Sonic motherboards are here, and they bring the performance and value of ASRock with a flair of everybody's favourite hedgehog. With support for the latest platform features such as DDR5 memory, PCI Generation 5 and Intel's 13th generation processors, your gaming PC has never been so well equipped. Give your gaming computer the flair it deserves today with ASRock. Learn more with the link down below. Welcome back. Let's get this show on the road. Let's press that power button and see what happens. Oh, it vibrated. That's new. We've got RGB around the analog sticks. Not sure about that. I guess it is a very ROG thing to do. And the thing for me that's really making me think, shall we say, is the fact that this obviously runs Windows 11, and traditionally Windows has not been a good platform for touchscreens, anything small and fiddly really, and we've got to hope that there aren't really too many issues with doing it like this. But obviously the benefit of this is that you can run pretty much any Windows game. This is actually a surprisingly powerful console with that brand new Ryzen chip, so regardless of whether it's Steam, Xbox, Origin, Epic, you should actually be able to play it on this. As you can clearly see though, this is not the Windows desktop. This is using some form of overlay to actually give you all of the information that you need without Windows getting in the way, and as long as it works, I have no problem with that. You've got your little command center here that you can customize with loads of different things. We've got different operating modes, silent, Windows, performance, turbo. So if you do want to use this as a traditional PC, then you can, which would be pretty cool, but I think most people will want to use this as more of a console, and maybe for lighter titles like CS, plug in a mouse into a monitor. That would be quite cool. What happens if we go into manual mode? We can adjust the wattage for our chips, fan curves, we can look at our system stats, and then you've also got content, which gives you your media gallery, system specifications, Z1 Extreme. Navigate down to storage. This is the 500GB model, but you can buy different ones depending on what you're after, I suppose. Not too much else to do other than to go into Steam and actually download some games. Here we go, look! And Steam has a fatal error. It needs to be online. That is fair enough. This is also a touchscreen, by the way. Is there a button to go into Windows? Yes, this one here. And then you could just use this as a normal PC. But then how easy is it to actually open up an app? It's okay, it's definitely not the absolute easiest, but for this sort of experience, it's not bad. While it's doing that, I'll actually show you what else is inside the box. I'm imagining that it is just a power brick. That's half of it, and here's the other half. Pretty small actually. This does charge over USB-C, so in theory you could just use this for pretty much your smartphone, all of your devices, maybe your laptop as well. What's it rated for? 65 watts. That is quite a lot. That's actually a very small power brick for 65 watts. I'm impressed. It's done. Let's see what happens then. We open up Steam, and it does now go into big picture mode, which is pretty cool. If it didn't do that, that would be slightly concerning. And now this actually looks very Steam Deck-like. This immediately feels a lot bigger and longer, I've got to be honest. This was almost great as far as I'm concerned in terms of the way it feels. It just always felt a little bit elongated. Like, it was fine, I could make do with it, but there's definitely a huge difference in terms of shape and size. If I push this until it sort of lines up there, it's definitely a fair bit longer, but actually the profile of it, this is a lot more bulbous and flat, whereas this is more sculpted. But of course, the advantage to the Steam Deck is that you've got their touchpads on the left and right hand side, which granted you won't always use, but if you're playing something like Civilisation, I find it really useful, whereas you don't really have any such equivalent on the Ally. But let's get ourselves some games installed, shall we? I'm going to go with Arkham Knight, because it's a game I'm actually playing at the moment, and I'm fairly sure that this is a game that you cannot actually run on the Steam Deck unless you install Windows on it. So that's not to say it won't run on this, but it won't run on the default OS. Whereas this, right out the box, download it and it's ready to go. Let's try ourselves a little bit of Halo Infinite as well. And then something that I did use the Steam Deck for a fair bit, some Civilization 6. And one of these devices is now making some noises. And it's not the Steam Deck, it is the Ally. Nothing crazy, but there is definitely a little bit of a hum in the background now that the CPU is actually working away. Rightio then, games are installed, let's get this underway. And let's start with some Batman Arkham Knight, as this is, I say a little bit of an older game. This came out, what, about 8-9 years ago, something like that. So I would expect this to run very well, considering the age, if you like. And of course, remembering that this can't run natively on the Steam Deck. While it's doing all of this little installing, I should also say that you've got this little button up here that opens up the ROG menu. It's called their command center. This is very similar to what you get on the Steam Deck, where you can essentially change all of your quick settings. So if you want to maybe change the refresh rate down to 60 Hz, you can do it here, turn on AMD upscaling, FPS limiters, resolution, there's quite a lot, and you do get this little monitor here as well. Let's go into our options menu, and let's see what we can change around, shall we? We've got 4 GB of VRAM, so this should fit in there without any issues. We'll change everything to max, and we'll leave all of the GameWorks stuff off, because that's just a little bit unnecessary now, isn't it? And I have to say, I'm genuinely excited to see this, because this really is going to determine, I guess, how useful this is for me to be able to play all of my games on the go without having a nice selection of games, but not all of them. How do we feel? Well, there is definitely a little bit of latency at the moment. This is not the absolute smoothest. It does look good, but I think we're probably getting about 40 frames a second or so. The adaptive sync is definitely doing a very good job though, because visually this does look great, but you can actually feel a little bit of input lag from the controls, but that's probably down to the frame rate rather than anything else. In fact, if we open this up, we can see we're getting about 52 frames a second or so. So it's still very powerful, but don't go expecting miracles. This is ultimately a portable machine. And you think this was a game that was actually really hard to drive when it came out. So to be able to actually play this on the go anywhere you are is definitely something that is quite impressive. We need some volume. Let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, that's good. Those are impressive speakers. Those are very impressive speakers, actually. I like the vibration as well. This definitely feels a lot more immersive, which sounds a bit weird because usually you say that for like VR or just larger screen sizes, but it does feel like the whole thing is reacting to better than you would get if it sort of didn't have fantastic vibration. So that's a nice touch. That is definitely a nice touch. Before we move on to our next title, there is one more test I want to do to see how the performance of this changes versus AC power or on battery, and this has a built-in benchmark. So let's try this first on our AC. So let's have a look. What do we got? An average of 53 frames a second on AC. Let's run this again. I'm expecting there to be some difference, but to be honest, as this is literally a handheld games console, I'd be quite disappointed if there's a drastic jump. The whole point of this is that you will use it on a plane, that you will use it when you're out and about, transport, anything like that really. So if you do need to be connected to AC power, that would be quite disappointing. Obviously you can almost bypass this by buying quite an expensive battery bank that will deliver all of the power that this actually needs, but that's extra expense, something else to carry around, and again, it would be quite annoying. What did we get before? 52, I think. And now we're getting an average of 53. So there you go. The difference between battery and AC, at least in Batman, is essentially the same. I was going to say let's move on to Halo Infinite, but this has also brought up its own sort of problem that I'm having, and I'm sure there's like a keyboard shortcut to get this up. When you actually touch the screen, it doesn't always bring up the keyboard, and if you press A to sort of enter it in, again, it's not actually bringing anything up. And this is something on the Steam Deck that does just work a lot better because it always knows what you're essentially trying to achieve. So when you enter text or hit a text box, it does come up with a keyboard. And this is the sort of quirk that I think you can expect with like a converted Windows device into like a games console. Right, I think we've done it. We got there in the end. Unlocked frame rate, quality preset, medium. Turn the textures up But let's jump into some multiplayer, shall we? And I'm really hoping that this does feel okay, because actually playing Halo Infinite is one of the few first-person games that I think you can play with a controller, and it's not only fine, it's perfectly acceptable. But to me, there is definitely a little bit of lag with these joysticks. It's a bit of a shame. I mean, the frame rate of this actually seems to be pretty smooth and responsive. Yeah, I've got to admit, I'm feeling pretty disappointed right now. I don't understand why there's so much disconnect between the gamepad and what you're actually seeing on screen. There's definitely something that's holding this back, because I refuse to believe that this thing is not capable of feeling pretty much on it. I'll swap over to an actual gamepad in a second so we can compare. The latency is just nowhere near what it needs to be. Let's go get a controller, and then let's see if that's different. And yeah, this now feels exactly as you'd expect. Don't get me wrong, it's still a controller, it's no mouse and keyboard, but there's none of that horrible disconnect that you're getting from the controls on this. And this is something that I saw a little bit of on the Steam Deck, but this was only in certain games when you had like VSync and things enabled. Like generally speaking, especially if you use the touchpads, it was actually pretty good. Interestingly though, I have discovered that you can actually adjust all of your profiles on a per game basis. So if you go into the options here, you've got left and right sticks, and you can actually adjust all of these dead zones and outer thresholds and things that should help the situation, but it's more of a latency thing rather than a dead zone problem. So I'm potentially thinking that there's maybe like a software layer that's sort of trying to do some form of conversion, or there's something going on there's actually stopping this from talking to the game as natively as you'd like, and there's something causing a little bit of a delay. If this is the case, I think this could be fixed and remedied, but right now if you get this out of the box and you play some Halo Infinite, you will notice that using a gamepad feels better than using the sticks on this, which is definitely a shame, because otherwise the actual shape of this and the button layout is really good. I would say it is actually better than what you get on the Steam Deck. Obviously you do get the touchpads, we mentioned this time and time again, but to some people that's just not going to matter. It depends what you're going to play. So what we're going to do now is open up some Civilization 6, which is a game I use these all of the time, and we'll do a little comparison. Well, this is just classic, isn't it? It's currently around about 12 o'clock. The embargo on this device is in about 3 hours or so, but there seems to be a firmware update that has actually changed things ever so slightly with this, where it has actually improved the latency of the gamepad. I opened up Batman, and honestly, it sort of played exactly how I want it to play now, which is fantastic. But moving back over to Halo, it was still fairly similar, unfortunately. It was better, but it does, I guess, feel a little bit more like four-dimensional, like you're moving up, down, left, right, rather than having full use of the analog stick. So I think there is still an improvement to go, but the good news is that things can be improved by firmware, or at least it seems so. So overall, a fair bit more promising. So here we are then, Civilization 6, mouse and keyboard game time, if you like. And this does not work at all. It does with the touch screen, so what we need to do is go and change it from gamepad mode to desktop mode. This is where we get our little right stick button, and we can go to game options, and this feels terrible because there's just not enough minute control. Oh my god. Right, there we go. Game options, yes. Can we make this bigger? That would help. UI upscaling. Only available at certain resolutions. Brilliant. And let's have a look. Right off the bat, again, the game is just way too small. That is too small now to be comfortable. I mean, what happens if we turn the resolution down? 720p. It's not even coming up with 720p. I've got an option of 1080p or 1080. Is that it? It's just so frustrating that this control center doesn't actually seem to do anything until you restart the game. I mean, it does give you the option to bring up the keyboard. That is good. I missed that. I apologize to ROG. That was there the whole time. But that doesn't take away from the fact that pretty much the rest of these options, or at least the ones that actually matter to the performance of the game, don't really seem to work until you restart, which is very frustrating in something like Civ that takes you like 2 minutes to exit it and close it and get back into the game again. It's just not really as fluid as I would like, despite the irony that this has a 120 Hz 1080p display that makes it very fluid. Or at least it should if you can run it. This is fine. You know what? 720p is probably going to be your best bet, because the detail difference between this and 1080 on a screen size like this isn't drastic, and the battery life is going to be a lot better, and obviously you're going to get a much higher frame rate as well, which when you have that 120 FPS screen is going to make a big difference. I don't know why I didn't try this earlier. This is definitely better. Question is, can you actually make use of this? And to be fair, I think the answer is yes. I would just advise changing some of the button layouts around, because having this button as you click just doesn't really work. Whereas if you sort of change it around like you can do on the Steam Deck, whereas the trigger can be used as clicks and things, then actually I think this will be all right, even though the joystick isn't as good as the touchpads you'll have on that. But we're still not getting 120 FPS, getting about 55, 58, which does beg the question, how many games are actually going to be able to play at 120 FPS? And I guess this leads us on to the interesting, not conclusion, but I guess the end of this unboxing first impressions thoughts, that technically speaking, this has a lot of potential, but I do think at the moment, it's not necessarily quite where it needs to be. In terms of polish anyway, I think this is gonna be a real winner, and fundamentally, the way it feels on the hand is better than the Steam Deck, and that alone for a lot of people is gonna make this worth the money. I mean, this ROG RGB thing is a little bit stupid, but other than that, the design is pretty on point. I like the port selection on the top and the fact that you can expand this with the XG mobile chip and things like that. Decent SD card expansion, that is very, very good. And obviously the ability to play your games at 720p or maybe 1080p, 120 FPS, that is a real winner. But all the time you've got this sort of, not necessarily really buggy software, but software that doesn't quite cohesively match the over experience in the same way that you get on the Steam Deck. Hopefully this can get to the point where it is a lot more seamless, but as I mentioned at the start of this video, this is always going to be the problem with running something with Windows 11, because you've got this very heavy OS running in the background and it's not really designed for this. You think games consoles are really light, that's why everything tends to work as well as it does. I think the main thing for me is just this whole control gamepad thing. If there's added latency, that needs to go. I will be reaching out to ROG and seeing if there's a way to fix this. If it's a software update, fantastic. If there's something I've done wrong, then I will let you guys know. I would like to point out that this is very much a first impressions. I'll be doing a full review after using this for like a week, couple of weeks, something like that, and give you like my final verdict. So if there are some things I've missed, like the ability to open up the keyboard with that button, then apologies, but people want to see the first impressions. And I guess the question very much does go out to you on this. What do you make of the ROG Ally? Do you think this is going to be your next portable games console? Do you already have a Steam Deck? Would you consider swapping out for this? Or if you are looking between the two, which one do you think takes your fancy? The one that's arguably a little bit better polished, or the one that has more capabilities? The one that feels a little bit nicer in your hand? I'd love to hear from you, so let me know. Absolutely smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video, get yourself subscribed for the full review, and of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on the ROG Ally or anything else featured in this video, you can find it linked down below with my Amazon affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not check out ASRock's beautiful Sonic motherboards? These bright blue motherboards are bound to catch anybody's eye. And thanks to options in both B760 and Z790, you're fully up to date with the latest features, with support for i9 gaming processors with a whopping 24 cores. Give your gaming PC a whole new ring today with the link down below. But thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.